Welcome to Between Data and Risk podcast. Today we'll be discussing an advanced socio-technological paradigm of data mesh, which has been gaining a lot of popularity in recent years. As my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Siwiak, is also the co-author of the first practical handbook for data mesh implementation, published by Manning. Today I'll be interviewing him. Stay tuned.
If you're a business owner or senior manager, you probably had more than enough about all the wonderful opportunities awaiting you in the era of digitalization.
Whether it is big data, cloud, data science, or whatever buzzword is currently trendy.
If you would like to hear someone dissecting these claims and showing you what it actually takes to improve business processes, you're in the right place.
This is Between Data and Risk, where we discuss real-life examples of what works and what doesn't in the world of business operations.
Hello, I'm Artur Guja, Cognition Shared Solution Chief Risk and Strategy Officer, and with me is my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Siwiak.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to this episode of Between Data and Risk, and today we'll be talking about data mesh, which my co-host is very knowledgeable on. Marian, you've co-authored the book Data Mesh in Action, soon to be published by Manning. So maybe you can tell us what it actually is. Let's start with that.
Data mesh is a socio-technological paradigm. It's a mouthful, I know, but I want to make sure from the very beginning that it's not considered your typical data architecture. It's not something that it's supposed to replace data lakes, data warehouses, or lake houses, or whatever fancy method of actual data storage is implemented in any company. It's a way which was initially proposed by Jean-Marc Degani from then ThoughtWorks, which is supposed to merge data management, data governance, but also data use, data, let's say, maintenance, data care, the way the data is prepared, presented, and consumed. And it's on both. It's very it's very closely connected to the whole enterprise architecture. We spoke about data, about enterprise architectures with Tushar, and this topic is very closely related to it. So it's the way of thinking about how the data should be generated, stored, owned. I think that's the key word, owned, in the enterprise. Did it answer your question?
Well, it's still, I think that the concept is still unclear because there are different technologies, there are different methodologies, different paradigms. What's the kind of key difference in this one? In hundreds words or less.
It's not a technology. That's first. So comparing it to technologies is a futile exercise. Okay, I said what it's not. So what it is? It's a way of connecting data with people who produce this data, connecting this data with people who will be managing or processing this data, grouping these three together, meaning data producers, data managers, engineers, and the data itself into coherent units called data products. And then it's the way of connecting these data products into a mesh, which is governed. Again, there is an element of teams design or designing the structure of teams in such a way that this mesh is not siloed on the one hand, and it's not completely balkanized on the other. So there is a controlled connection between these islands of data, so to speak.
So in my simple mind, I mean, we've been talking between ourselves about data mesh a lot, and you've been trying to convert me. So my kind of simple understanding, without much training in it, is that if we have different pockets of data, different sources of data within the company, instead of delivering all the data to a central team, we keep the data with the originators of the data, where the data is actually produced. But instead of having this, as you like to say, instead of having balkanization, so where everyone does whatever they well please with the data, we set certain standards within the company. So there's a central governance which sets the principles, but there's also kind of localized governance that actually has ownership of the data, and they decide what data they want to expose, and within certain standards how they want to expose, what views on the data they want to expose. So within this, can you explain the concept of mesh? Because we've got all these data. We've got an organization. We've got all these data products. The data owners, they expose their data products, right? But with at this stage, I think the picture is of having different storefronts which are conform to a certain standard, but they are still separate storefronts. So where does the mesh come in?
Let's start with one explanation which might be critical for business people. When we are talking about storing the data with the people who generate it, we are not talking about technical, like you need to have your own server and you will not be able to use the beautiful data lake that somebody, your infrastructure team built for you. We are not saying in data mesh that you should store it on your laptops. The infrastructure can have data lake, they can have data warehouse, or whatever architecture you are using. It's about the ownership. So you as a business team, you own this data and you have support depending on the size of your team and the scale of the data that you are processing. It might be completely dedicated team for your data needs, or it might be part of the team, but these people, they are you become part of the joint team. So this is an important remark. Now about the storefronts. A friend of mine and co-author of Data Mesh in Action, he likes to talk about data marketplace. So you have a storefront, of course, but now what you need is a place where you can come and look at different storefronts. So metadata management becomes critical, having the data catalog or master data management or whatever solution you will come up with. But and if you have just the storefronts, you are getting close to data fabric, which is another architecture. The difference between data mesh and data fabric is that the data mesh has this governance, deep governance, embedded into its structure. So you mentioned that there is a central governance team which works on the policy level and standards level, and you have this localized data owners who have flexibility to operate as their business unit or business domain, we will talk about it in a minute, requires. But the connections are strictly governed by the centralized platform, which is provided to ensure and enforce the governance rules upon data mesh users. So if you want to open your storefront, you have someone coming over and checking if your storefront adheres to the standard, if the metadata is sufficiently filled, that there are no fields like, oh, I will fill it one day when I will have a mood for it. If the quality of the data that you provide is sufficient and ensures that if you have a product on your storefront, you actually have it, and there is a proper versioning of the contracts for your product delivery. There are, again, new technological solutions like the data contracts, which are supposed to automatically connect data producers with data consumers or whatnots. But again, it's data mesh assumes that the data stores or data products, in fact, will be connected to a mesh which will ensure the proper governance. So it's not a goodwill. It's a set of strict and business decided rules which everyone needs to adhere to ensure security, findability, accessibility, reusability of data, interoperability as well.
So I like visual kind of language, visual description. So we at this point, I think we arrived.
Podcast may not be the best medium for you.
Well, I said visual language, right? Not the visual arts, but visual language. So I think we arrived at the shopping mall, where the management of the shopping mall decides certain standards for the shops that want to open their kind of the units there. They set the standards for how the products will be displayed, what information needs to be provided. But each store owner can decide, what kind of product they want to present within certain standards, how they want to present it, to whom they want to present it, whether they want to allow certain customers in or out. They decide the rules, right?
It depends. It's we spoke about it in our episode on federated governance. The governance is federated, meaning there are some decisions which are being made on the central level, and there are some decisions which can be delegated to the local data product owners. Now, the exact cutoff point of which decisions belong to which level depends on the business. So the level of, let's say, strictness, it's business dependent. It doesn't really matter to data mesh as such. It's like you would want to say that, you have a data lake and there you can only store, movies or.
So we have a certain flexibility. For example, with respect to access rights, you can decide in your own organization whether you decided on a central level or a local level or a mixture of the two, some kind of hybrid solution.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
That's the way we wrote our book and the way we implemented data mesh in our lives was always, I would say, inclusive. So I don't believe there is one and only true data mesh type. There are 4 principles of data mesh, which should be. There is actually a discussion like, does as an architecture need to present all 4 of them to be called data mesh, or can you name data mesh something which has only some of them? I think
that's a theoretical and a bit puritanical discussion. But you mentioned those 4 principles.
I want to make sure that it's being said loud and clear. There is a discussion, and business people who will be trying to learn about data mesh, they can find different descriptors or different definitions of data mesh, and data mesh is supposed to help a business. It's supposed to help businesses to connect business with data or bring data back to business and in decentralized fashion. So whenever you will find someone who says that they have silver bullet solution and the structure which works, for everyone, just steer clear. And that's what I want to say. I don't want to go now into the details of each camp. There are camps, and if you will find the fanatical member of any of these camps, you are in risk that his camp vision may not exactly fit your business. Maybe you should open
Which is, I think we shouldn't really, argue about whether something is or isn't, because we always have the same discussions about Agile and Scrum and these kind of paradigms for software development and project management, whether is something really Scrum or is it maybe kind of tainted Scrum or whatever. So let's not kind of argue about specific delineation, but the 4 principles, I think it would be a good time if you could bring those into the light and tell us what they are.
Sure. So the first principle, which is really, really, I think, critical for successful implementation of data mesh, is domain ownership. It means, I think we spoke about business domains previously. Again, the specific domain definition is not critical. Like there is a single domain definition style which makes the domain suitable for data mesh. However you delineate your domains in your business, however you will split it into operation areas, it depends on your business. But now that you have, think of them as a unit which is producing data, and make sure that the business people there have support from dedicated data people. So together they can work on this data and make sure that this data is properly governed, managed, presented.
So let me kind of nitpick here a bit. You said dedicated data people. Do those data people have to be dedicated really to that domain, or can they be provided as a shared resource from the central governance?
They can be, again, I think I said it in the beginning. Maybe I misused the word dedicated. The dedication should be that they know your domain. They can be shared, but it shouldn't be like there is some pool of data people that you randomly select from every time that you have some data need. Of course, I'm not saying it's the only way, but reasonably, it's about making sure that data people understand the business domain and they work with business people. So it makes sense. Of course, maybe in your business case, you will have just the data team where you will have a random people just serving some data purposes. But in essence, in the most cases, these people should be dedicated to your team, not meaning that they can't work with anybody else, but meaning that if you have a data need, you have a name, email, I don't know, phone, or
so
whatever.
It's about the expertise that they don't need to be explained every time what your particular business domain does. They actually have sufficient knowledge of the business domain.
It's about the cooperation. So they work with you, and you learn from them about the data and the technicalities of data management, harmonization, or I don't know, transformation or whatever, and they learn from you what is your business, and together you create this data product, which is the second principle, which is treat your domain data as a product. Whenever I like it that you came up with this supermarket, with the mall example. You're going there and you see products on the. It's not just we sell shoes, and there is a blank glass, and you can go in and see maybe some shoes, but there are products presented. The product is something which is well defined, well described, presented in a specific way. There is the whole, I would say, area of business of product design, and these principles of product design they apply to your data. So your data needs to be prepared to be consumed like a product. They need to be standalone.
If I understand it correctly, it's not just about preparing a huge database with every single piece of data that you can think of, putting it in the shop front in a big, plastic bag and saying, come and get it. It's about actually packaging it in sensible kind of
human readable form.
Well, maybe not human readable, but in sensible packages that will actually have a meaning. So in here, it's kind of when we go into product design, does it kind of put the onus on the data owners to think about their clients, i.e. what data can be useful outside, or should they be thinking about what data they can present?
In my humble opinion, they should focus on the data that they present. I don't think most of the business people or even data people working within a specific domain are capable of coming up with every single potential application of the data that they produce, especially in the larger enterprises. Like if it's a small business where you talk to everybody and you know what they do, maybe. So I think we will have to at one point talk about the limitations of data mesh. So when does it really make sense to use data mesh? But no, if you are at your domain, data domain owner, or if you're working with it, you need to think about what data, according to the policies that you have, you are allowed to present, and then to make sure that this data is presented in a format allowing someone else to consume it. Of course, within their access and
so
rights.
I think we'll get to some of it in the when we get to the fourth principle. So let's go to the third principle of federated governance, and here the word computational kind of creeps in. So can you talk a bit about that?
Federated. We spoke about the federated governance model some time ago. Just as a recap, it's a situation where you have a central governance body and you have local.
As in domain owned.
Domain areas of operations with domain data owners who have some operational freedom. As we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, the exact split of responsibilities between the central and local teams will very much depend on your business and the data that you have. Now, there is this creeping computational part. In the beginning, I mentioned that data mesh differs from data fabric by having a strongly governed platform, which we will have to touch upon because it's an element of the principle number 4. But computational, it means that the rules that you create shouldn't be human readable, so to speak. They need to be okay, again, too strong word, but preferably they should be, if possible, automatically enforced. And so you need to be able to translate these policies or rules into algorithms of accessing, not accessing, sharing, not sharing, or, checking quality or whatever. It's about not creating wordy policy books which are sitting and collecting dust, and maybe someone will remember about them when something goes wrong, and when there will be time for pointing fingers, and there will be question who to point finger at. To avoid the blame game, you should be able to encode and make the rules automatically enforced, which leads us to this self-serve data platform, which is principle number 4. Actually, maybe I should let you ask questions about principle number 3 first, if you prefer.
No, let's go to principle number 4. I have some good whoppers of questions waiting just to stump you.
Right.
But I want to hear about principle number 4 first.
So the idea is to have a central platform which serves as a connector between data products. And it's a space where you should be able to learn about data products, see the shop fronts, preferably use it also to access all of them according to the rules decided by policies and embedded deeply into this platform structure. Again, the platforms can be minimal, and in our book we describe a simple platform as Git, registering text files with the description of data products, where to find them, what's inside. And it can be a behemoth of authorization, connectivity, bandwidth control, quality monitoring beast, which can also make you a coffee probably.
So within this, you mentioned that it can be as simple as having a Git repository, but how does then the computational part kind of get reflected in it? Because I always have a problem with this computational part, because this assumes that you have policies which can be encoded, and you have infrastructure and kind of a technical platform which actually is able to encode these policies. And if I go back with my memory to the first simple SQL databases that we had ages ago, 20, 25 years ago, compared to some of the technologies that are available today, obviously a lot has moved forward, but not everyone can afford to or spend time to encode those policies. So is it again, can we say that it is again a bit hybrid, where some policies should be encoded, but whatever is not encoded but you still feel it's necessary, you still can have some human readable policies?
Again, my definition of data mesh is as inclusive as possible. So yes, of course, you may have some policies like don't take sweets from the strangers or data or whatever. The idea is, which you touched upon now, is maybe data mesh is not for you. If it's a big cost for you, yes, it's a costly solution. It's not solution which will fit every company and everybody should. I'm not the type of evangelist who now tries to convert everyone into data mesh believer or follower. Let's stop here.
So we'll talk in a second about who data mesh is for, but I still want to kind of drill a bit into what it is before we decide who it is for. So you mentioned again that it's at least you mentioned to me, I don't remember if it was mentioned in this episode, but you always mentioned to me that it's technology agnostic, right?
It is
that it doesn't actually depend on a specific technological solution. But then a lot of this, so the computational governance, the self platform, they actually imply that there are certain requirements that are put on the technology underlying data mesh. So if you could spell out those requirements. So one is definitely that you should be able to put certain rules on your data product, right? So it cannot be just a public share on a network with your data files, because then you don't have any rules for the data itself. You may have some access rule for the share, but not really for the data. So that's not sufficient, right?
No. It depends on how strict you want to be around the definition. If restricting access is sufficient for your business case, and if you follow domain ownership, if you're treating data as a product is a detailed description and findable identification of what's in the shared folder, if there are certain rules governing mentioned access rights, or if they are not coded, but let's say they are described what you can do with this data after that. And if you have this tool, I don't know, can be a SharePoint, which serves you as this data platform, you can talk about sort of data mesh, because why not?
I'll challenge you here. I'll tell you why not. Because you explained to me that one of the kind of, maybe not one of the 4 principles, but an important concept in data mesh is the versioning of the data product. I remember we had a whole discussion about the fact that if you put a data product out and people start using it, then if you want to make a change to your data product, and for example, you had a field that was a number, now you want to be a bit more generic, so you change it to text. You cannot do this just by modifying it. You have to release a new version, right?
Yes.
So how would you version?
You should. I think it's the difference between could and should. Because what I'm trying not to become is too fanatic about certain solutions. Because if there is no business need for versioning, maybe it's an overkill. So it all depends. Like if somebody needs version data, which is very often
version
the case.
Data products, not version data itself, right?
Oh, there are cases where you need version
two
data.
Different things.
Yeah, but sometimes you also need version data. But if you need versioned data, I went deeper. So you also have a version data product, then you need to develop tooling, and SharePoint probably is not the best one for you. But if you don't need it as a business, you can use SharePoint, and as long as ownership is localized, as long as this data is treated as a product in a remit required by your business, and if you have this federated governance model where these domain owners have their ability to act with business people, and there is a central governance ensuring that there are some certain policies ensuring compliance, or whatever it is that in your business needs to be decided on the central level, then why not? It's again, I don't want people to believe that the data mesh is something which is really well defined and everything else is wrong. It won't work as a data mesh. It's very business. What I like about this approach and this architecture, it's very focused on business needs. It's very focused on business domains. It's very focused on providing extracting value from data. So you create data, you have your data, let others extract value from it. Will you have versioned data products? If you have such an ability and business need, go for it. If you don't, well, hey ho.
Okay, so it's basically a spectrum, and again, we like to be practical, and one of the principles of being practical is that you adapt to the needs. So I like this. I like this about your kind of approach very much. I think we agree on that. But so then let's talk about who data mesh is for and who it's not for, because I know you're rearing to go that way.
Oh yes, I am, because I again don't want. I've seen it happen to data science, where all of a sudden everybody needed a data scientist, and it rarely ended up bringing as much value as everybody hoped. So I also don't want data mesh to be misunderstood, and if everyone will try to implement data mesh, it will kill a pretty good idea, because amount of frustration will be, and disappointment will be overwhelming. So in our book we mentioned 3 elements which are, let's say, neither of them is sufficient nor necessary, but if if you have all these three properties of your business, then you should at least consider data mesh as a solution for you. First of them is diverse data. Because if all of your data is almost identical, then you can have a central team which can handle it very well. Because if you work with only, I don't know, certain types of data and certain attributes of data, then you may have a central team which will be able to understand it and manage it very well. So if all business domains use the same data, limited types, as I said, variable sources, or
so it kind of boils down to if you have a single domain, then you don't really have a mesh, right? Because if all the business domains use the same data, then maybe they really one business domain, right?
Even if not, it's like if they have completely different business functions. Somebody's sales, somebody's marketing, but they operate in some area where you have customer data and you just use it differently. Then data mesh is
different data pipeline, right? Instead of
exactly. So if you don't have diverse data which you use in your company, then maybe not. But if you have really diverse data sources, data types, then it may be worth thinking that maybe connecting your people with data people, with business people, will allow this data to be much better described, managed, and understood all over. I've seen that you try to ask the question. I will try to answer it before you ask it. I wonder if I guessed it. There is second face of the same coin is data needs. If you have complex data needs, because if you have different and complicated structure of data sources, but you have very limited use of data, then again, maybe it's not for you. Maybe even these complicated data sources can be managed by some central team, and they end up being pushed into, I don't know, a single dashboard, or in the end you get 42 and everybody's happy. But if you have complex data needs, and you have multiple different teams which do different stuff with different I wanted to say with different data, maybe they do even different stuff with the same data, then maybe you should think about data mesh, or maybe data lake will be better for you, or data lake house, or even data warehouse. But still, it's worth considering. Like, okay, so we have this complex data utilization, but it again depends. If it's a single data source that you then slice and dice, then maybe this single central team will be able to control it. But if you connect diverse data sources with complex data needs, there's a question about the volume of requests and operations, and maybe your central data team may become a bottleneck, and maybe you should think of distributing the ownership. Mm-hmm. And the third part is level of socio-technical complexity. Socio-technical complexity means how many different teams are working on data. So how distributed is the work? If you are a CEO of really big corp, having hundreds of different IT teams supporting hundreds of different business teams, then again it might be a suggestion that data lake might be a good fit, because then these teams can work closer with your business, and the data that is generated, it will not lose its meaning through being transferred from one team to another, and in the end the central team which collects it and puts it into the lake doesn't even really know what's inside. They can't possibly know all the possible naming conventions used across it. Somebody will write, name, somebody will write a surname, somebody will write the same thing in 16 different languages. And your ability of your central team to really harmonize this data and extract some value is somewhat limited. So data mesh, let's say, should be a no-brainer maybe. When you have diverse data, you have complex data needs, and you have high socio-technical complexity. Again, it depends on your business. It's maybe your existing data warehouse from 1982 still serves its purpose. If it does, leave it alone.
You did mention a certain kind of concept which I want to challenge you on a bit. Data harmonization. Mm-hmm. If you have your data mesh, at which point do you decide something as simple as a convention that if you have personal data, then you should decide probably across your data mesh whether you store name and surname separately or you store them as name, surname in a single field. It's a kind of simple example, but I think I want to illustrate a point here. Is that the kind of principle that needs to be decided centrally? And at which point, because that there may be certain rules that evolve in your data, at which point does the central team step in and say, we're taking over this part of governance and we're now bringing
whenever they decide to.
So there's
they are the central governance. They need to understand what they govern, and according to compliance or standardization or normalization, they need to be aware. They need to work closely with data product owners. They are not. When I talk about the central governance team, they are not ivory tower. We spoke about this centers, networks of excellence, about this, someone it's called guilds, sometimes it's called chapters, or, some communities which realize that there are some questions like yours, if they pop up, if they should go to the central team and say, okay, is it something that you would be interested in stepping in, or shall we decide, we think this is the best solution? If it concerns more than one data product, it stops being a local governance issue. And then if it's no longer the local governance issue, it doesn't include your little shop, but you are thinking, if, I don't know, the toys that you have on your web front are not offensive to someone, to the clients of meat in your storefront is not offensive to the vegan shop and its clients. On the other hand, if it's no longer your shop, but it's something between two shops, you go to the central team.
So, again, I want to challenge you on something. I know the answer, but I think at this point, certain members of the audience might be thinking, okay, so the central team, why don't we just take the representatives of all business domains, put them together in a room, and they form a committee, and that will be our central governance? Why is that a bad idea?
We spoke about it in our federated governance. It's not only a bad idea in federated computational federated data governance, it's a bad idea in general in any type of federated governance, be it resilience, be it whatever. The problem is that it's no longer a federation, it's a confederation. And it's not an argument because, why confederation is not better than federation. Well, it's about independence. The team which is supposed to control the policy level, the company level issues, needs to be independent from BAU on the local level. Otherwise, you risk that the strongest personalities, that people with the most push, they will enforce solutions which might be best for their data products, even if they are very important data products, even if they are, let's say, really relevant. But these solutions may not be optimal from the company perspective. Having the company perspective requires independence from local politics, so to speak. Does it answer?
Yeah, so you know that I agree with this. I just wanted to bring this out because we've described in our article about federated business governance how kind of going above the local interest is what's really required, and that ensures that you have that level of kind of oversight, 10,000 feet view of what's going on, and you can really harmonize the interests rather than taking part in this local scuffle. So this is where you should be applying data mesh. You mentioned the three kind of indicators, let's call them, that data mesh is applicable. Are there really any cases where it shouldn't be touched with a barge pole, like a no cases?
Your business operates smoothly and everything works as it should. Okay,
in that unlikely example, if it works, don't break it, right?
Yes. You're supposed to. If your data team handles things all right, you have happy business people working with your central data team. Everybody says they get what they need, and the central team has ability to react to whatever data needs your business has. You can ask them if they feel like they would like to try something else, but it means these guys know what they are doing. And
so
if they keep
don't come in one day and says we've got this newfangled paradigm, everyone's doing data mesh, let's do data mesh because we can put it on our brochure that we're doing data mesh now, right?
Oh, no, we will
we're a meatpacking company, but we'll do data mesh now. And,
the data meatpacking company may actually profit from data mesh, but if don't try to make false this happiness down your people's throat. Business need is first. Again, I want to make a slight distinction between business need and proof of concept. It's very often a bit mixed up. We describe in our book the example of micro data mesh, which can be built within a month, just for starters. But data mesh is, as I said, it's a socio-technological paradigm. It's a pretty big change, and it's an enterprise architecture level change. So expecting, because what happens when you implement data mesh? Suddenly the data becomes available and people can use it, and people in business work closely with data people. In my data science career, which started before data science became a buzzword, having data guy coming into a business team and telling them, okay, what are you doing? What are your decisions? Let's see if there is any data available that could help you. It's a game changer on its own. So for me, this domain ownership and connecting data people with business people, not in a subservient role, like, okay, we prepared you this dashboard, or give me this analysis and this chart because I need it for my yearly report, but really talking to each other, like, okay, what is it that you do? Oh, that's interesting. Did you think about supplementing it with this data? I know that this team produces it. And say, oh yeah, actually I would love it. I didn't know that we have it. This is the spirit of data mesh, and this is what you aim for, really.
So
did it make sense?
we had the kind of the self-serving platform. We had the principle of federated computational governance. We had the principle of creating domain data as a product, and going kind of stepping back. If you're creating the data domain as a product, you have to have domain ownership. right? So you have to first set up your business in such a way that all those things, and I purposefully mentioned them kind of from the back, that you have to set your business such that those things are actually possible within your enterprise architecture. Or alternatively, like you said a minute ago,
they become architecture.
They become your enterprise architecture. So the question now is kind of, do you need specialists? Put it this way: who needs to be specialist in data mesh? Does it need to be the business people, or does it need to be the data people? In which, or because taking example from Agile, right? It's obviously always the IT people who are the Scrum Masters, the Agile coaches, the specialists. They come from IT, but increasingly it's being recognized that the real benefit is in educating business people in what Agile is, so they can use it properly. So is it the same case with data mesh?
You just asked me who should lead an effort which is at its very base a cooperation effort.
Yes, because in reality, someone's going to lead it.
If the business person loves the idea, is able to convince the others that it works well for everybody, then it will be this business person. If it's that's why it's one of the reasons why I wanted to emphasize that it's technology agnostic. It doesn't have to be technology specialist. If the business needs that they want more from data, but the central data team is so overflown and overloaded with data management that they are not really capable of providing them with required data understanding, data speak support, then this business people should drive, okay, let's find architecture which allows us closer cooperation. If it's the same central team which is just overflooded with all this data management requests and spaghetti pipelines maintenance, they should go and say, okay, let's cut this Gordian knot, and let's build something which will allow us helping you, because currently we are not helping you. We are just trying to sustain the environment which is choking us all. So I don't think there is.
Yeah, I should probably come clean at this point that what I was driving at is that we actually do provide specific training for business people on data mesh so that they can fully understand it and be properly bought into this solution, rather than IT people, pushing it on the business, because it's never a good idea where the tail wags the dog, and it's never a good idea where enterprise architecture is kind of driven by technological solutions rather than the other way around.
In this sense, I think I spent last 50 minutes trying to explain it. Data mesh scope, like if, how, when, it all depends on the business need. The data people, IT people are not the best people to really describe this data need. They can, as I said, if the central team is overflooded, they can go to the business and say, let's change something because we don't feel that we support you as much as you deserve it. But yes, it's deciding on it. It requires the business need assessment. The scope, the type, the governance type, the domain decomposition. It's all in hands of business. On the other hand, there is this self data platform which requires certain capacity from and maturity maybe from your IT team as well, because we didn't speak about it, but it's also a case. People need, teams involved need it's better if they have certain data and operational maturity. They are more agile. But yeah, it's not technological solution. It's not like you can go to your IT team and say, make me a data mesh. No, let's make a data mesh. This is something that business person can, and maybe if they have diverse data, complex data needs, and high socio-technical complexity, maybe should say.
Kind of wrapping up, I think we should do one thing, because you mentioned that there are different camps in data mesh, and obviously data mesh it's a very fresh idea. It's still evolving. There's quite a lot of people working on shaping the idea. So I think we should kind of put out an open invitation if anyone wants to kind of present their own opinion or view on data mesh with kind of specific examples or practical solutions. Then we're very interested in hearing about this. We did put out invitations to certain specific people about data mesh and data mesh experts. Unfortunately, we haven't heard back, but we're still hopeful. So, any kind of final words?
Work with your data people, and if your data people work with the business people, that's something that I always say.
Make technology work for business. And a special guest, as we mentioned the tail wagging the dog. A special guest on this episode, my dog Archie. Archie, come on. Special guest on the episode. And as always, let's hope it was of use to someone.
Thank you for listening.
Make sure you check out Marian's book, Data Mesh in Action, on Manning's website. A link to the publication will be available in the notes to this episode.
Also, don't miss the next one, where we will be talking about scaling technologies and achieving breakthroughs. To discuss with us a practical case study of technological scaling, we've invited Ross Youngs, CEO and founder of Biosorcia Pharmaceuticals.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or visit bdr.show to find out more about future episodes and guests. You can also check out cognition.llc for more information on Cognition shared solutions, our services, and other events hosted by us.
For now, it's thank you from myself, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Siwiak, and my co-host, Artur Guja.
Thank you.